Welcome back to Marketing Careers Uncovered. So, today, what we're looking at is that experiences working in marketing can be really, really different depending on either the sector, your seniority, the areas of specialism, or even the size of business that you're working in. And in particular, the world of startups can be very, very different to perhaps working in a larger firm, or even some of those that you'll probably consider small. So when we're talking about small teams, smaller or sometimes even non-existent budgets, and rapidly changing priorities can make the startup world one of the possibly more exciting yet extremely challenging environments to work within. So today I'm really, really excited to be joined by Alexandra-Walker Jones, who's going to be sharing some of her stories and experiences from her extensive experience in this whole startup space. So thanks so much for joining me. Just to kick us off, could you give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself and what you're doing with yourself right now?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dave. It's a pleasure to be chatting with you again. I am a content writer, published author, and marketing manager. My most recent role was as head of content and communications for a business called Sophie Health, which I did for just over 3 years. And presently, I'm really excited to be sort of expanding and going back into the freelance, looking at consultancy opportunities, working with all different types of clients on some very exciting new stuff.
So, on a day to day basis, could you give us a bit of the flavour as the kind of work and activities that you've typically been involved in?
For sure. I've really been fortunate enough to get involved and have the opportunity to get involved with the marketing process at all different angles. So working with brands from anything from initial conception to product offering, pricing, positioning, all the way to go to market launch, marketing campaigns, and beyond. Um, I think I'm a copywriter, creative writer by trade, but I have an educational background in psychology and behavioral science, which I credit with allowing me to kind of sidestep into the strategic side of marketing as well, and the behind the scenes where really all the real magic gets to happen even before words hit the page. So it's really fascinating to have that opportunity to sort of go start to finish with different aspects of the marketing process.
And particularly in this startup world as well, there aren't different distinct teams looking at these different pieces. So actually, yeah, you have no choice but to be strategic, look at go to market, have that creative eye. You've got to weave all that together, haven't you?
Absolutely. I mean, most of the time you're either a team of one or a team of very, very few, doing your absolute best to make sure that you're covering all your bases with regards to the different lenses to view whatever project you're working on through. It's a huge learning process, one that I really, really enjoy. But there is constant learning to be had, and never the same day.
So what do you enjoy the most out of this particular environment more than anything?
I think personally, I've never been big on routine. I wake up, I have my coffee at a different time every morning. I get out of bed at a different time. I'm not a routine person, so I find that environments where the ones I enjoy the most are places where change is fast and there are new things to learn. I'm a big believer in when you stop learning on the job, it could be time to move on. Um, I would also say working with great people who continue to set and consistently raise the bar for success within a team is the utmost privilege. And it's really what makes or breaks an experience for me. And I've been very lucky to have some incredible people to work alongside in the startup world.
So let's rewind the clock a little bit here now. And how did you actually get into marketing in the first place? Was it something you always wanted to do?
Funny enough, not at all. I was probably actively in opposition to it. I can remember the audible groan and the eye rolling that took place when my dad, who is largely a marketer by background, first tried to float the idea of copywriting as an industry with me. Um, I think he pointed to the back of a vacuum cleaner box and the copy there, and it was just not interesting to my sort of 10, 12-year-old self. And I would say the honest answer is that for the first sort of 18 years of my life, I had no idea what I wanted to do career wise. Consequently, as I was looking into university and choosing sort of what path to go down, path of no return, the only thing that seemed reasonable really was to dive deeper into the things that personally interested me, which really happened to be psychology, the human condition, consumer behavior, and publishing and writing online. So I really merged those two, and that was sort of my entry.
And how long was your dad still? Did he give up at any point in trying to foist the idea of marketing, or was he a constant voice there?
He is definitely a constant. He's such a big part. He's really shaped sort of who I am and my approach to work as well. And he's always the person that has a go-to book for anything. So I had, a stack of 3 books on my coffee table anytime there was a new discussion about a different area of marketing, or maybe you could do this for a job, or lots of what colors your parachute type books where you figure out what you're going to be doing. Much to my dismay, to be honest, when I was an early teenager. But he's always bounced around in the marketing world as well, so he has a great deal of expertise there as well, which is really, really, really helpful.
And was he working in a similar startup type space or larger firms? Where did he play at?
So my parents are both serial entrepreneurs. So he has businesses, whether it's, he's had a range, whether it's, advertising or web marketing, sort of creating brand playbooks. So he again is very autonomous, always done his own thing, and sort of followed his interest there. So a great role model to have, but very much the Wild West of kind of doing what you want to do and seeing what works.
So marketing and entrepreneurship very much in the blood.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say so. Although I didn't want it to be. I really I was never set out to be a marketer, that's for sure.
So what was that turning point for you? And when did you stop resisting that little voice in the back of your head and go, well, actually, I could probably do something here.
Yeah, it kind of was forced upon me in the best way, in that I really started I started publishing online, and I really credit my early articles on a website called medium.com with opening up my first opportunities within the marketing and the freelance world. Um, and it really sort of caught me by surprise. It was when people started wanting to pay me for it that I went, oh, okay, maybe now I should approach this from a marketing angle and really understand how to do a good job at this. And that was, ever since then, it's been smooth sailing.
So how did that come about? Because I'm familiar with Medium. It was a is it still running now? Actually,
Yeah, it's still up and running. I've got about 200 plus articles there. Sort of, it's fun to go back and see what I wrote in my younger years.
so it's all still there, publicly available. Anyone can go up and see what you were
100%.
writing right at the very beginning.
Yeah, for sure. And really, when I started writing, I mean, I was probably 16, 17, 18. Those were kind of the prime medium years. I kind of considered it an unpaid day job for myself, in the sense that I would, be at my desk for a set amount of hours, and I'd hold myself accountable for publishing, maybe 1 to 2 2,000 word sort of research articles or topical articles every 2 to 3 days. The subjects vary widely, which you can see if you go back. Some of it's creative poetry, and the rest of it's marketing, and the rest of it's psychology and nutrition and health. So I really followed my interests there.
That's remarkably disciplined. Far more disciplined than I ever was at that point.
It kind of was a panic mode because I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I thought, well, I better do something, right? I mean, I've got to do something that kind of builds a portfolio in that sense. I didn't know where I was going to take it, but I have always been a writer, so that seemed reasonable.
So you're sitting down, very, very structured, going, okay, I'm going to spend some time writing about areas that particularly interest me. At what point did those responses start coming in and going, hey, would you like some money to do this?
It really sort of happened all at once, and I'll never know if it was sort of a lucky 1 or 2 articles that sort of reached the right lucky persons, but probably about 100 plus articles into having published them. I had 3 or 4 requests to freelance for smaller wellness startups, tech brands, both for just copywriting, mostly digital, and as well as more strategic communication roles. So that was a turning point where I went, okay, now I'm gaining some traction and I am being noticed, which was a great feeling.
So at this point, when you're on Medium and you're starting to publish articles and you're starting to get noticed, you're still in this I enjoy creative writing phase, right? So if
Yes.
I used the word marketing, what did that really mean to you at this point?
I can't say it meant an awful lot to me, really. I think coming at it, sort of entering into it from the creative side, I always knew it wasn't really a hard science. In a lot of ways, of course, when you're first starting out, that makes it feel all the more difficult to grasp. But like I said, I didn't see myself as a marketer. The real focus, particularly because I was still in my late teens, was trying to combat my imposter syndrome that I got through suddenly being contacted about these opportunities. So my focus was, I can't say it was on successful marketing at that point. It was really just an emphasis on, right, I'm going to put in the hard work here and do my research and, due diligence. It just so happened that putting in the work lent itself to, positive marketing results and happy clients who went on to further refer me, which was nice.
So you're starting to grow this network by virtue of doing a really good job, taking the work seriously. So even if you're not calling yourself a marketer, shall we say,
Right.
a lot of the things that you're doing around making sure you're doing proper research, due diligence, and not just putting pen to paper and whatever comes out. There's marketing skills there being right, even if you're not using that particular label.
Absolutely, and I know for a fact that I was Googling, as one does, a lot, all the research I was doing was about marketing, and I'm seeing that term everywhere, and I'm researching that specifically. But it's the sort of part of me that was like, oh, I'd be a fraud if I said I was a professional marketer at this point. So that really came with, more, ample years experience where you step into that role and you go, right, I feel qualified now, which is great.
So then moving forward from that, how did you start to broaden your scope from those creative writing projects to those broader marketing type roles? What kind of things were you being asked to do and being approached for? How did that start to happen?
I got very lucky. I was actually approached by the CEO of a major international corporation who had seen my writing, particularly on nutrition and plant-based health, and he wanted my help strategically. It was still a content role in the sense I created a 12-week course for his C-suite of managers, directors, executives to basically support the company's transition and kind of get everyone on board with the company's transition to a plant-based um, positioning. So they would stop selling the animal products and go towards, promoting this lifestyle. Totally new to me. It was really
Very, very different, isn't it?
very different. And of course, all I had to go off of was, I'm a convincing writer, which is kind of what he saw in me. But my age was kept anonymous. It was all done online so that there wouldn't be sort of any you know, any hesitation, I guess, of, I'm still quite young and new at this, and we certainly didn't publicize my background, having not had any experience doing this.
How did you feel about that?
Terrified, like absolutely, absolutely terrified. But at the same time, nutrition and health was something I was so passionate about. And I did have all the facts and figures and the numbers, and I knew I could do a good job with it. But really, really scary to be on the line like that. It was strategy is it's a delicate dance, especially when you're dealing with people that have every reason to kind of say, don't agree with that or provide some backlash. So it was huge learning curve.
What about the notion of your sort of background age being stripped away and sort of hidden? Were you comfortable with that? Did it make sense to you? Well, was there a bit of a so what? Why should anyone care if I'm 22 or 46? Should it make a difference?
It shouldn't is the real answer. But when you're 19, and I think I mean, it must have been the average age of people that were reading this, taking part in this program, 50 to 60 to above. These are all leaders. I was totally happy for it to be, I wanted the emphasis to be on the content I was producing, and the facts and the figures, and the real angle that I had chosen to take, not providing any ammunition to kind of discredit me based on age. But in that, I feel absolutely grateful for that opportunity, because it also took away my hesitation based on my age, based on my lack of experience.
Was there a big sort of undercover boss reveal at the end where 19-year-old you was wheeled out and ta-da?
There was. I was flown to the headquarters to give a talk publicly, and I mean, I must have been shaking in my boots, and I think there was quite a lot of shock of like, this was who did it. But again, fantastic opportunity, and I'm just glad I went through with it, really. So
Well, yeah, because it would have been easy to say no. I don't think I'm ready to do that at this point. Thanks,
right,
but call me again in a few years.
certainly.
But something told you to go. Actually, yeah, I'll have a crack.
Yeah, I kind of made a rule for myself, and I think it's an important rule, especially when you're working for yourself, is to never, if you're scared to do something, that's not enough of an excuse. So to really force myself, it's okay to do it scared, but you have to do it in that sense. So I'm a big kind of believer in, say yes until you know for a fact that it's a no. And I think you have to say yes enough times that you get the expertise to know what's a no. So I am happy with myself about that.
Yeah, very much. Say yes. Put the work in. Know where you've got some gaps where you
Right.
might plug in. It's not a yes. Oh, I'm sure it'll be fine. It's a you know what you're getting yourself into.
An educated yes would be a good way to, yeah, an educated yes. But because you learn, and it was sort of well, if I fail, yes, I might cry for a week on end, but I will have learned so much. So there's kind of no justification to me to have said no. I definitely wanted to at multiple points there.
So, taking a look at your current role at Sophie, what was your route into there? How did that all come about?
I had actually been, this is sort of during that freelancing time, I had been applying to content marketing roles, stepping more into that marketing space on purpose this time. And I actually received an email out of the blue from the CEO of Sophie. Kind of initially thought it was a scam email. It was very brief, which is kind of his MO. But coincidentally, my name had been referred to him by a hiring manager that I had met a few months prior for a role that didn't end up being the right fit, which was very kind of her to remember me and put my name forward.
That also reminds us that you're talking about potentially quite close knit communities and networks where if something doesn't quite pan out, then actually leave and part on quite good terms because you never know where your name's going to end up being dropped in or not.
Absolutely, and there's so much overlap with, people that are in that world, whether it's starting startups, working at them, consulting for them. There's usually more than one. I mean, it tends to be this repeat sort of venture. I think people just have the itch for it. So definitely, it is very wise to always end on good terms. I have to say that's probably 90% of the roles I have landed have been by way of connection, which is a wonderful thing to have. So with this startup, the original contract was just for a couple of months. Really, I think it was 3 months to come in just to work on the content strategy and newsletter marketing. But as it tends to go with many early stage startups, it sort of quickly evolved into a more of a senior position, which was definitely a equally rewarding but also very challenging place to be.
So, what kind of work were you then getting involved in as you stepped into more senior positions there?
It felt really natural because it was just sort of I remember the CEO saying to me, like, if you want to take the reins on this and that, and the this and that would be, anything from doing, UX, which was a more specific type of copy, all the way to marketing campaigns, building social media, a large part of the community role as well. So really honing, who we were marketing to, the sort of the offering, pricing tests, a lot of research, consumer research for the customer. It's as much as you can do while also keeping everything running. Was you have the freedom to expand into it, if that makes sense. There were no other, at that time, no marketers on the team, and so it was really exciting to just decide what might be better, and not for me but also for the success of the company, to be able to step into that and say, I'm going to try this or learn this or implement this.
So, where were you drawing some of your inspiration and thinking from? Was that within the team? Were you looking outside, pulling in different opinions, drawing on broader network? Because we talk quite often about the risks of becoming institutionalized, and particularly yeah, if you haven't gone through any formal marketing qualifications, it can be quite easy to end up with quite a skewed version of what marketing is, and only actually realize 20% of what could be achieved. So how did you go about sort of railing against that?
Right, and I think it was really, I think I don't have a marketing degree, so I didn't learn marketing from a textbook. So it was really starting from a blank slate, which in many ways is an asset, as long as you can learn quickly and pick up, the important things that pertain to your specific, whether it's a product or a company or a role. And specifically with Sophie Health, it's a very unique product. It's also the first of its kind, and so there wasn't really there wasn't a basis for comparison or to see what the predecessors done. So very much learning from the customers, learning from feedback, testing. I mean, tons of A/B testing, tons of iterations, and change, in especially early stage startups, is every single day, every single week. You have to pivot incredibly fast, and sometimes you've been working on X for weeks and weeks, and suddenly you need Y. So just being really open to receiving those external indicators of success, even if they don't fit into that box of your preconceived marketing ideals.
Yeah, yeah, sure. And particularly interested as well in the types of people that you're working with, because it's very much a space where there's lots of you can end up working with lots of people who've been quite senior in larger firms who tend to find their way into this startup environment. What were you picking up from them as you went along? Because imagine it's quite a rich vein of knowledge and expertise that you can't really. There's not many other places where you can drink from that from such a fire hose.
Absolutely, and particularly when it is a small team, you get very, you're working with these people constantly, but it's small enough to count on one hand some of the time. So you know what they do as well, quite intimately. I think also, if there's one thing that early stage startups do by necessity, it's to very quickly weed out anyone who isn't an equal contributor or an asset to the team. So by nature, you really do have people, not only that are habitually in the startup world, whether that's starting ventures or guiding them, but just experts in their field as well, which are absolutely invaluable to have people like that to lean on and to learn from. I'm a little shy about how excited, I mean, even joining mundane day-to-day meetings, I'm sitting there just absolutely having the time of my life, because these are such pioneers in their field that it's really a concerted effort not to nerd out, when they're speaking about what they do best.
Yeah, it's just normal day to day stuff
Yeah,
for
it's just the
for them.
Monday
How could you
meeting.
possibly find this interesting?
Right.
But yeah,
Yeah,
if you've
no.
got your
Yeah.
ears tuned the right way, then there's lots to be
Yeah.
taken from that for sure. So I've had the benefit of working across quite a few different ranges of firms. So those really really small startup environments that we talked about to much larger firms. That's what I want to get a sense from you is talk me through a sort of day to day reality. What does that look like for you? What kind of things are you doing on a regular basis? How fast are you having, having to move here?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's funny is that it's not terribly dissimilar from working for oneself in the sense that the responsibility to own things and get them done and see them through all the way to the end, it rests entirely with you most of the time. So I mean, day to day, you know, it would look like, I wake up, create my own priorities list. I'm shifting them constantly according to the timelines that you're juggling or what other people in the team might need from me. And you knock them out one by one, sort of however makes sense. I think, there's no micromanaging, and at least there really shouldn't be if a startup has sort of any is destined for success. You really have to be able to rely on the people in your team. Um, and at the same time, I don't want to sugarcoat things. I mean, for me, the freedom of setting your own schedule and working remotely with a very small team is the dream to me. But it's definitely matched at times by the stress of the role and feeling like, if you drop the ball, it's not just your department or your team members you're letting down, but it's literally very much the success of the company. Deadlines are not as flexible as you might have with a larger corporation, if they're flexible at all. I mean, most of the time it's to the wire. And, it's not something I recommend, but there's been many a 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m. Zoom meeting where you have to be there. So there are personal sacrifices that go along with it, but it's really up to the individual to weigh that reward versus challenge.
Quite often we're talking about time horizons here. Of if we sit down and have a discussion today about starting to pull together something for a new product launch, we're potentially talking days to
Yeah, yeah,
implementing something, not weeks or months. So you've got to be able to pick something up straight away with a hell of a lot more ambiguity than you would ever expect
absolutely.
anywhere else, right?
There's not a written brief. It's like a 10-minute call, and you go, oh my god, we've got to do this, and you all go off into your respective, caves, we actually called them. You go into the cave, and you have to, get it done. And it's funny because you'll receive, later working with freelance clients, they might give me 2 weeks to do something, and I'm like, wow, that is really a lot of time. I mean, when you're used to literally day to day turnarounds. Um, and every day there's a different thing to be working on, or a different thing to really, get 50% of the way progressed. You have to be very focused and a big emphasis on your efficiencies and not wasting time in that sense.
That sounds really, really busy just in its own right. How, amongst all of this, you're bouncing around the proverbial pinball machine, trying to juggle deliverables in quite a fast paced environment. But you've also got to develop yourself, otherwise you're not going to move onwards, upwards. So how are you keeping those skills sharp or developing the new tools that you need to keep pushing forward?
I think thankfully there's a decent overlap of my personal and professional interests. And again, I think I sort of credit my entrepreneurial parents with that because, the dinner table discussion was always around business and strategy and marketing and sort of through that lens of how the world works. So really intrinsically, I'm a bit of a marketing and business nerd. Um, I reading lots of books on it and making sure that you are, when you can take all the media, because there's media being thrown at us all the time. I mean, but when you can take it and kind of do, whether it's 5 minutes or an hour of dissecting it through that lens, I think it always lends itself to, different ways of thinking and improvement, not only professionally, as it specifically pertains to your product or your job or your campaign, but also in the wider scheme of things.
Yeah, I've often found that I've got an ever burgeoning collection of reading material and books that people have either recommended, but I'm still trying to but I'm still trying to plow through podcasts. We're listening to one now, right? So, what kind of resources are you pulling on to keep your head in the game?
I just finished rereading a book called The Marketing Leader's Code by Gareth Helm, which I highly recommend. It's sort of a very practical distillation of and distilled guide to the often very grey area of what being a successful marketing manager looks like for any role. I mean, it really applies across the board. And I'm always trying to stay up to date with different trend reports and also following, just keeping a sort of your finger on the pulse of who in the industry is really killing the game. People I look up to, people I admire, especially when it comes to social media and digital marketing. Change is so fast and imminent. So just you have to pick out the parts of value. Otherwise, you'd be consuming 100% of the time. But if you can curate who you follow and who you're turning an ear towards, that's sort of how I make sure to get the most bang for my buck.
That curation piece is really, really important because
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of crap out there,
Yeah,
and really taking the time to sift through and say pick those people working in particular areas who are doing what you want to be doing next
right.
as well. Have something quite aspirational about it instead of just staying where you are and listening to people who are doing a similar thing to you.
Totally. Like, the risk is you don't want it to become an echo chamber, right? If it's just validating what you're already doing, there's just no growth there. There's not going to be improvement. And I think that's how you fall behind in the game. So definitely, change is good and being aware of that. And, maybe 5 people, like it shouldn't be everyone that you're trying to pay attention to. There's not enough time in the day. It should be, or 5 sources rather that you are, you're tuning into.
So going back to your sort of startup career, uh, what are you really enjoying most out of everything you've done so far?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think in and of itself, I really, really enjoy taking on different challenges in my career and pivoting in new ways. The beauty of having arrived to marketing without, a formal marketing degree, I don't have any agency experience. I've got no idea what it's like to sort of work at a bigger corporation. Um, the benefit of that is that I really feel like I'm free to lean into the different facets that interest me, whether that's, multiple ones all at the same time, as is the case in many startups, or singling in on one particular thing that area I want to grow or area I want to improve or work on. And because I've never had that set path, I think being open to changing my course feels really exciting, and it doesn't feel like I'm giving up on a plan or going back on something that I've had pre-prepared in my head. So the novelty and the growth and the constant learning is absolutely what I enjoy most.
And if we stick on the hindsight goggles, which would be a wonderful thing to have, is there anything where you look back and go, if only I'd done this a little bit differently or known something different, what would what would that have been?
That's such a great question. I think in retrospect, I wish that I maybe would have realized the value of my time a little earlier, not only to sort of calm down some of the imposter syndrome that I think most people experience, at the start of their career. But for an example, at one point, I think I was 18, but I remember giving an early client a quote for some recurrent monthly deliverables, and they actually emailed back raising me £200. So at that point, it was, a pretty good indicator to reevaluate my rates and, sort of give myself the credit where it was due. At the same time, it's hard to say that that's it's not a regret in and of itself, because I also think there were times where I specifically recognized that the value of gaining a particular experience or working for a particular company, it can 100% outweigh any monetary benefit. And so for example, again, in university, I volunteered to write for a nonprofit organization. It was an unpaid role for about a year, part-time, but it was a great choice because it really springboarded me into writing full-time. And I think when done with at least some sort of start and finish in sight, I think you can get your foot into the door. Whether it was my Medium publishing, which was sort of just to see what would happen, or strategically choosing a company where that the experience outweighs the pay. I think there are times where that's called for just as much as raising your rates.
Yeah, I think we've all done that. Especially quite early on, where you're not really quite sure how to pitch yourself, and you don't want to come across as being particularly money grabbing with exorbitant rates. But kudos to the firm actually for coming back to you and going, actually, you've undersold yourself here. Not many would.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. Yeah, no, exactly. And again, it's about, I have been just very lucky in that the people that have encouraged me, and whether it's encouragement of the form of raising your prices for you, or just giving great advice and being a mentor, is it's such a privilege. So definitely being surrounded by the right people and the right opportunities, is 90% of it.
So what's next in the pipeline for you? Are you still thinking of staying in the startup world? Have you got an itch to scratch elsewhere? Have you got a game plan, or are you seeing where the wind takes you?
As far as what's next, I love startups. I'm really passionate about it. Not only because I think it's just so important from a business perspective to have change and innovation, but also because of the opportunities that it prevents, to get in front of top players and to really feel like you're making a difference in what you're doing. Um, but as far as career wise, I'm leaving it open. I think there's a real joy in that for me. Um, for all I know, you might find me as 10 years as the CMO of a fancy company. It could maybe be my own company, or I might, totally change gears and shoot for best-selling author instead. I think it's great to know what you're good at and what you enjoy, and as long as those two sort of overlap in a way that is, also pays the bills, I'm definitely open to whatever feels right. And if kind of my path so far is any indication, I'm certain it won't be a boring route forward.
Just to wrap us up a little bit there then, if you had to pick one thing that you're most proud of and your one biggest learning experience, what would they be?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing I'm proud of is the it's the responsibility I held myself to about doing it, but doing it scared. Um, I just think there's you develop a lot of integrity by going through with things, even if you're part of the monkey brain says no. This feels unsafe, right? It's uncharted territory. So I'm quite proud that the opportunities I've had, have been accepted and followed through with, and there was never any chickening out, which was not easy. Um, and as far as learning experience, I mean, there's so much. I genuinely feel like the past sort of 6 years of what this career has been for me so far has been a constant learning. So not one in particular sticks out. It's a lot of personal learnings as well. Um, yeah, it's such a privilege.
So what have you learned about yourself?
um, that I'm a strange combination of loving, I obviously must be, bizarre in some way to love the lack of structure, but I'm also severely type A. So balancing my own stress and desire to have, control and perfection in things, and with also the inability to have that structure, it's been like a learning how to cope kind of personal learning.
That's quite a yin and yang, isn't it? There.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think working remote as well with the balance is, it will be interesting. I'm open to transitioning into a in person role as well, because that would be totally new for me. It's been me and my laptop wherever I go. So um, just excited to learn more about how I manifest in those sort of roles as well.
Brilliant. Well, thank you ever so much for spending a bit of time talking to us today. Really, really appreciate that.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.